Hello, I'm Gemma and this is Non-Fic Books, and I've got a review video for you today, and that is Mark Haskell Smith's Naked at Lunch, The Adventures of a Reluctant Nudist. And this was very kindly sent to me by Atlantic Books as it's a new publication out in paperback. And unsurprisingly, according to the subtitle, this is a modern exploration of nudism as it stands at the moment by a non-nudist. He's an American writer who has written a couple of novels as well as a non-fiction book on cannabis, and he is not a nudist but has gone into this world. And first off, I just want to say how adorable is this cover. I think it's a really beautiful book and it's absolutely hilarious with all these naked people on it doing interesting things, and I love the parachutist. That's just amazing. And unsurprisingly, with the subtitle, he is going into the world of nudism, which is fairly new to him, and exploring why people do it, why people have such a problem with nudists, and sort of how the different attitudes people have towards nudism. And he covers quite a range of things, from the Big Nude Cruise, which is about 1,600 people naked on a cruise ship going around, I think it's the Bahamas, it could be the Caribbean, can't quite remember, which was very, very funny. And his attitude towards it is really open-minded, which I absolutely loved. Just going to hold my hand up and say I'm not actually a nudist, but I do find it very interesting, and I certainly find people's negative reactions to it very interesting, because I think it just smacks of a level of insecurity about the body and being obsessed with the body being about sex rather than the more natural side of bodies just being bodies. And it's a lot of cultural assumptions, and this really causes it to be so shocking and immoral. And that's something that Haskell Smith goes into quite a lot, and he looks at a lot of the ways that, especially in America, because he is an American writer, how different states have tried to ban it, or other states that have not banned it totally but have just said not in normal places or textile places, but there are beaches and hikes that are nudist appropriate. And it's a really interesting exploration of that. Part of his book looks at the history of nudism, how it really became popular, looking at it really in Germany, where it really started becoming big and getting hold of the popular imagination, and then how it's transformed in America over the last century or so. And to do this, he goes to a couple of nudist camps in the States and looks at the different attitudes of people there, and obviously gives it a go, and finds that actually you can just end up relaxing quite a lot, although it doesn't stop being funny at points. And I really think it's an interesting look because he compares the American side with a more European attitude, and by European I'm sort of classing the UK with the American attitude, because we're a little bit less comfortable in the UK about nudism and naked bodies as they are in France, Spain, Germany, Italy, and a lot of other European countries. Mainly, I would have thought, a lot of the time because of the weather. It's a little bit harder to be a nudist when it's freezing cold, but there's much more relaxed attitudes, and a lot of areas of Europe where every beach is somewhere that is okay to take your clothes off, and that you can do naked hiking and all sorts of interesting activities with no clothes on. And that's another sort of aspect that he brings out in the book, that there's sort of a couple of worlds of nudism. One that's more sort of a traditional classic level of nudism, where it's older people in quite secluded camps or communes where people feel totally safe, but it's very much you need to almost be a card-carrying nudist, and yes, there is such a thing, and go into one of these camps. And then there's another school which is also in enclosed camps, but is much more of the free love swinging sort of nudism, where it really, the naked body does interplay with sex, but it's about being more open, refusing a lot of society's constructs about the body and relationships and sex, and is a lot more of a swingers environment and very open to everything, which he didn't partake in, but he did see, and that was certainly very, very funny. And I like his attitude of sort of live and let live. If people want to do it and they're hurting no one, then just let them go for it. And he does sort of challenge you to say, if you have a problem with it, what is it that you're really having a problem with? And what is it about you that means you can't cope with other people doing something that isn't hurting anyone? And I think that's a really interesting attitude to have, and not always the attitude towards people doing less normal things and more shocking to society things. And there's a big stream throughout the book about you don't necessarily have the right to not be offended. Having the right to be offended and to offend people is actually a really quite important freedom, as long as you're not actually hurting someone, and that hurt and offence is not the same thing. And I think that was really, really eloquently done, and it was really good theme running throughout it. So apart from being very, very funny, it does challenge you when you're reading it to question what you think about people and about the naked body. And then going back to the three camps, the third camp is the younger, more popular non-card carrying nudists, and it's sort of nactivism or nakedism, and it's being naked but being active. So it's much more about skinny dipping, naked hiking, doing sports with no clothes on, and pretty much doing almost anything from yoga to painting in the buff. And that's quite interesting, and the way he's explored it is really good, as he's looking at people who don't fall into just the typical easy to find category, but looks at people who are doing it on a more individual basis or just in smaller groups, rather than being part of a national or international organisation. And there's one really, really fun website, which I think is I can't remember what it is, but it's about a couple in the UK who have now moved to Germany, but who are walking around Scotland and walking up mountains and then taking naked pictures at the top of the mountain. And it's a really fun website, and I'll link that down below. And overall, it's an absolutely wonderful book. It sounds quite funny being on naturism and nudism, but it's actually really interesting, and it's about society's views on the naked body as well as just people who take their clothes off. And I think because of that, it will appeal to a much wider audience than you'd think on a book on nudism. And I think even if you're not interested in taking your clothes off yourself, this book could be really, really good for you. His writing style is really easy to read, but very, very funny. And I really recommend that you go and pick this book up. And I, for one, will be going and having a look for his book on cannabis, because if he approaches it in such an interesting and well thought out manner as he does naturism, it should be really, really interesting. So yes, overall, Naked at Lunch, really, really good read. And I just want to say, this book was sent to me for free, but there was no sort of guarantee of writing a good review or anything like that. It was just very kindly sent to me by Atlantic. So if I knew it was this good, I would happily have paid my own money for it. It's a wonderful, wonderful book, and I highly recommend that you give it a go and read about something that you might not necessarily have thought about reading before. Because really, who can resist a book with a chapter title like that? So if you have any comments, please do leave them down below, and I'll hopefully see you in a video soon. Bye!